Well, I saw Alien Romulus, and I was not very hopeful for this film. For a variety of reasons. The most notably, there's been an awful lot of bad Alien sequels. I've long since been of the opinion that there are only two Alien films. And that remains here. This one is probably one of the better attempts, if not the best attempt, since the failures of the previous Alien sequels. But it still drops the ball. And a lot of just the main thing as thinking about it, I mean, since Prometheus, I thought, well, what other story is there to tell? At least with Prometheus, which I think was a failure, did try to expand on the story. It was actually an attempt by Ridley Scott to go off into yet another narrative with the engineers and all that. It ended up not being the case. But to revisit the mysterious space jockey that was in the original movie and realize that was there. And I'd often thought a better Alien 3 would have involved that. Had at the end or after Aliens that Ripley and her friends would have crashed back on the planet and the alien ship's still there, and all of that sort of thing. And could have led to something. I understand there was another idea. I believe Dark Horse published a comic on that before they lost the license to Disney in Marvel and whatnot. But I'll have to look into that and see if they did that. But and then of course there was supposed to be yet another attempt, and I kind of wish that went through. Let's just pretend that Alien 3 didn't happen, and we'll get the cast back together. And do it. And I was like, well, I was all for it. It's all the cool concept art and everything. But that's one thing. I don't think Space Jockey would have played a role in that. The only other thing was, well, there's mentions of some sort of colonial war at play, and they could have involved the two forces there, and that was one of the main motives for the company sending the Nostromo out there in the first place to collect this creature and that sort of thing. Since Prometheus, it added a little more to it, that the actual founder of the company thought he could achieve immortality from the secrets of the engineers and that sort of thing, and all of that, and it resulted in the creation of the xenomorphs. And the silliness, I think, it's kind of an old idea, but still that, that aliens are the gods of humanity. They see it, but then who created the aliens? Well, some other aliens, all that sort of thing. But that ultimately, guess what? The xenomorphs and humanity are cousins. And it's like, I don't know, but then I don't know what else there is to do with it. It's a curious thing that there was, but you could just leave it alone, and that, well, there was some other alien species that encountered this monster, similar to The Thing. You have to conclude there was some other alien species that ran afoul of that organism and crashed on the Earth and that sort of thing. So here you have this movie that is the best looking one since the original two, that at least goes to great lengths to recapture the look and stylings of that, which the likes of Prometheus absolutely failed to do, which is odd considering it's supposed to be this prequel. Yet, I mean, I guess the only means by which to say, well, it was a more expensive craft because the boss himself was traveling in it and all this type of thing. So, but a lot of that there, member berries aplenty, and rinse, lather, repeat process and stuff like that. It expected it, and there's some angles they do that's unique to it, and how to outfox the creatures and so on and so forth. I can give them that. And it's not as bad as like Force Awakens, where it's a complete repeat of the original, but there's a lot there. Of course, a returning character from the original. And it makes connections too there right off the bat. This takes place in between Alien and Aliens. And would have thought that, well, you know, this is messing with things even more so, which of the narratives of the original two. But there's explanation aplenty in that, and especially how the movie ends, that it really doesn't have that big of an impact. It's well known, based on what you get from the first two films, that the company's desperately trying to get a hold of this creature for what they want. It was insinuated for the war effort. This one goes a little further. It does link to Prometheus. There is that in there, so they're maintaining that as canon. But it also leads to basically where it kind of just falls apart at the end, and gets it just looks stupid and silly. I understand the point and why this happens, but I was like, oh, damn it. Well, you know, by then I was all like, well, you know, it's suffering from the obvious problems of what else do you do? You know, okay, now we got a new group. They're trapped in the spaceship, and, you know, the monster's trying to get them. You know, yeah. And it's like, but there's really nothing else. So the overall, whatever this world is, this future world that humanity is living in outer space and on colonies and all that, I suppose that could have given some sort of new environment. But ultimately, it's the same thing. Can you survive the aliens and all that and that kind of thing? But still, you might have had enough narrative there to have something interesting for it. What they present here tries to do some of that, at least within the world these people live in the future. Not so much. I don't think there's any mention of the war itself in this case. So, but it does play out. In, you know, filling you in on the hardships and whatnot of life in the future in the world of Alien, and so you get a bit of that. And so, you know, the positives are it looks good. The cast is sort of okay. They're a much younger cast than usual with these films, but there's explanation for that as well in there. But ultimately, it just kind of falls flat. It's a horror movie in space, but it's really not all that scary because you've seen it all, you know. And I know they burst through the chest. The tail's got a hook on it, you know, and that's about it. So it's comparable in that, but it's very repetitive of previous films. And so unless there was some other overall arching angle to it, then there was an interesting thing about the android character and that sort of thing, and the other one. And I guess it does kind of leave it where there is a potential to follow this character in another movie. Both the android and the main heroine here, but I don't really see it as necessary because it would just be another attempt at recapturing the glory, and you can't do it, especially since you're not really presenting a new story. You know, you're just kind of shifting things around of the same old thing, and that's about it. If there was some other angle to it, then okay, but beyond that, there's nothing left here. And I really liked Alien. I loved Aliens. Those two are great, and it was and that's a good thing about it, in that how in a lot of ways very similar, and certainly some repetition in Aliens, but it's a completely different take on it, and that's more war movie than horror, you know. And so that was an interesting thing, where a lot of sequels are just very repetitive and stuff like that. But there's a lot of lessons there with Aliens, following Alien, which is full on, horror movie. So not the case here. It does look good. It's not the worst, absolute worst Alien movie is Alien Covenant. just terrible and so stupid. Not so much the case here that the ending just looks silly. But other than that, you know, there's some aspects of it's okay. The cat, and really the android character, is probably the most interesting of them. The rest of them are rather bland and don't really move you. They're nowhere near on par with the original cast of the first movie. Certainly not as colorful as the second one. And so there's not a lot to them. So the most interesting is the one who isn't even real. But that's about it. So maybe you can have fun with it. But as far as this is going to jumpstart the Alien franchise, I don't think so. Because there's really nothing new here. There's no clever angle that you can... Really, it's all you can do because, you know, a different kind of setting or some sort of approach to where, oh no, the aliens are coming, you know, because that's ultimately what happens. But I think Alien and Aliens pretty much did it all, and that's pretty much it. And I like to think that Ripley and Newt and Michael Bihn's character, who I'm blanking on the name he played, lived happily ever after as a family somewhere. And Alien 3 never happened. and then that's about it. So it's too bad, but maybe just, you know, take pointers and learn from the successful movies and come up with something new. I'm sure you're going to hear that a million times over for quite a few of these franchises, but after what's happened, you know, and not so much here really, but it's high time to start doing that. It's always a risk and it's hard, but there's really nowhere else to go. So anyway, Alien Romulus, check it out if you're really curious, but if you were expecting a glorious revitalization of Alien and all, it doesn't do that. It's just probably the best of the failed sequels that followed the classics of Alien and Aliens.